and Akshay will be handling the queries in the chat window.
Let me bring in Akshay, who is an MLGD in machine learning, and he has worked extensively in resource utilization in CPU and GPUs. And he has also worked on his project on sign language detection for deaf and mute people. So he is the go-to person when it comes for resource utilization. So based on our experience, there are like a list of frequently asked questions for this use case. We're going to go over it one by one. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop it in the comment section. And I and Akshay will be taking over the questions in the comments. And yeah, hi Akshay.
Hey Usha, thanks for having me on the DevFest, and also I want to thank you because of the use case that you took. I think it was pretty interesting. So glad to be here.
Yeah, hi. So let's get started with the first question. In the use case, as you have seen, we're using TF record format. And why is it the most preferred format? Are there any advantages to you? Can you elaborate us on that?
Definitely. So TF record is the TensorFlow's own binary storage format, and this really helps when you're working with large data sets. So binary storage format take less space on disk. At the same time, the training time is also reduced because you can read from the disk pretty quickly, especially if you're using hard disks or maybe HDDs, not SSDs. So this definitely helps in the efficiency. And not just that, because TF record file format comes within the TensorFlow ecosystem. So you provided a lot of functionalities and APIs which can be directly integrated into your machine learning or TensorFlow model, and then it could help you speed up your processing and your learning capabilities.
Yeah. Thank you, Akshay. No wonder TF record format these days in all the Kaggle competitions, we are getting data in the TF records these days. And it's quite popular. I totally agree to you. And the next question, we're also using TF data input pipeline. So is there any specific reason why we should opt for TF data pipeline over the other alternatives? Are there any advantages when it comes for performance? Can you elaborate us based on your experience?
Great question. So yeah, TF data input pipeline is something that I've used recently, and I found it pretty interesting. So let me give you a very simple example. So let's say if you're working with a machine learning model and you're using a GPU for training. So what usually happens is your CPU will get the data in batches. For example, let's assume that you will have a batch of 50 data points, and it's going to feed that to the GPU for training. Okay, so this is one step. So after this step, the GPU will have to wait for CPU to get the next batch of data points. Now, this delay will cause something called as GPU starvation, and this reduces the efficiency of our model. With the concept of data pipelining in TF, TensorFlow, we can use something called as prefetching. So prefetch actually helps the CPU to prefetch the next batch while the GPU is processing. So this will cause less delays, and your machine learning model will be more optimized.
Thank you so much, Akshay. I still remember the first time I met you was in OTSC 2019, where you were doing a presentation on resource utilization. In this case study, we are using one of the TensorFlow's core API, which is tf.distribute. Is there any specific reason why, what are some of the advantages it brings to table, and can you elaborate on that, please?
Sure. So TF.distribute API are newly introduced. I mean, they have been in the TensorFlow's pipeline for a long time, but they have become recently quite popular. And if you really want to check out the details, there's a great talk on TF.distribute and TF.data API given in the TensorFlow Dev Summit, which happened this year. So just to give a simple example, TF.distribute is closely related to TF.data APIs, but it talks about distribution strategy. So just to understand this, it enables a model to be agnostic towards environment, which basically means that your input pipeline and the model that you have worked on can be trained either on one machine or it could be trained on multiple devices. So in this case comes the concept of distributed training, and this distributed training reduces the time taken for a model to converge, and this can be done using parallelizing the workloads across multiple GPUs, either in one node, or it could also be done across it could be done across multiple GPUs in a cluster. So something that I did recently, as also you pointed out, that this is the same problem that I faced while working with Indian Sign Language recognition system that I was developing. I had a lot of data sets, so just to reduce the training time, I used TF distribute APIs to distribute my workload on a cluster of GPUs.
Thank you so much, Akshay. And coming back to the modeling part, here you might have noticed we are using EfficientNet architecture and we're using EfficientNet V6. And in general, can you give us some tips for dealing with EfficientNet set of models? Like, what are some of the tips for tuning them?
Yeah, great question. So, to be honest, EfficientNet is something that I came to know about pretty recently, and this happened because one of our fellow GDs, Akash Nain, has wrote a brilliant blog on Medium about EfficientNet. So, let's think of EfficientNet in this way. It not only focuses on just improving the accuracy, but overall efficiency of the model by rethinking the model scaling. And this scaling can be done in three aspects. So first, depth. Depth means the model can have more layers. Second is width, that is the number of channels in the layers. And third is the resolution of the image. So fine tuning can, in fine tuning, you can look up a couple of different aspects. First is, as you mentioned, that in your case, you use a B6 variant. We have B0 to B7 variants, which depends on different resolutions. So depending on your particular use case, you can use any of these variations. Second, and this is very popular, is that you could use transfer learning with EfficientNet, and it will help your, it will save a lot of time and resources at your end. Or at the same time, you can also think of controlling the regularization parameter, which will help your use case depending on the particular performance.
And because of the time constraint, we have not gone in depth into all the possible, advancements. We just kept the model to simplicity. There are a lot of concepts we were not able to cover, and one such concept is focal loss. So Akshay, but it's one of the very important concepts. So Akshay, can you take us through it?
Sure. So focal loss, to be honest, is not that complicated. So I'll try to simplify it with giving you a very simple example. So let's imagine that there's a football match or a soccer match going on between two teams, A and B. And at the 90th, and you're watching it at home on your television set. And on the 90th minute, team A scores a goal. So what usually happens is that the whole stadium will erupt, and there will be a lot of cheering going on in the stadium. So the job of the broadcaster is to amplify the sound of the commentator so that people sitting at home can also enjoy the goal, but at the same time, they can also listen to the commentary. Now, this analogy can be used in terms of focal loss as well. So focal loss is used to address class imbalance problems mostly. So what usually happens is that a modulation term is applied with the cross entropy loss function, which makes it efficient and easy to learn the hard problems. So this using this analogy, I think now things will become much more clear in terms of focal loss.
Yeah. Next up, we've also used something called tf.data.experimental.autotune. What are these experimental APIs, and what is autotune in specific? Can you walk us through the usage of it?
Sure. So as the name suggests, this is an experimental API, and because it has, the variable has all the capital letters, you can assume that it is a constant. So what usually this does is that it delegates the task of choosing the optimal level of parallelism as well as the buffer size to the runtime. So the TensorFlow runtime will be able to get the most optimum level of parallelism as well as the input buffer size. Of course, you can do this manually as well. You can do it manually, but doing it manually will take a lot of time. So these experimental for you to improve your performance, but at the same time, because these are experimental in nature, it's always a good practice to read about them on the official documentation of TensorFlow.
Yeah. Sure, I totally agree with that. And one more thing in this case study, we're dealing with highly imbalanced data. So, what are some of the common best strategies for dealing with class imbalance according to you?
Yeah, so Usha, I think this is a very interesting question because although it's considered pretty basic, but still, people might tend to forget or overlook. So I'll discuss about what are things that I do. And first is changing the parameter metric. And so what usually people do is that if their accuracy is high, they assume that the machine learning model is performing well. But in this case, accuracy is not the best metric. So in case of class imbalance problems, you can think of F1 score, recall, or precision as a better metric. Second is resampling techniques. So resampling techniques these are further subdivided into two categories. So first is oversampling of minority class. Basically, what you do is that you just copy and paste the points which are minority class onto the data set so that your data set becomes balanced. Now, the caveat here is that if you after copying, if you split the training and a test set, there is a very high chance that your test set will contain data points which are already present in the training set because you're copying examples. So, and this, of course, will not be a valid test set. So what you can do is you can first split the test and the training set and then do the oversampling. Now, the second resampling technique is undersample the majority class. So what you do is you delete some of the majority class data points and then you work with the rest of the balanced data set. Now, the caveat here is that you are losing out some information. So if your data set is pretty huge and if you can afford to lose some information, then you can go with undersampling of the majority class. And the fourth one is pretty important, and this usually plays an important role in image data set, is generating synthetic examples. Basically, you use some sort of an image augmentation technique or upsampling techniques to create your own synthetic examples. And this is something that I did while working with my project on sign language, because I was only like 4 or 5 people were creating data sets. So I wanted to use a bigger data set, of course. So that's why I created my own synthetic examples. So I hope these points make things much more easier for you.
Yeah, thank you. And the next question, big bad question, is like some of the tips and tricks for better utilization of TPUs. Do you have any suggestions?
Sure. TPUs or tensor processing units are Google's custom developed application specific chips. And these are cloud TPUs are specifically accelerated or resources accelerated to perform well on machine learning models. That is, they can perform well, they can perform pretty good with matrix computations as well as linear algebra problems. So now the real question that you should ask yourself is that when should you use TPUs and when not to use TPUs? So if your model has a lot of matrix computations, it has a lot of linear algebra, then you should go with TPUs. Second point is that if your model does not have any custom operations inside the main training loop, then you should use TPUs, because if you have some custom code, your TPU might not be able to optimize that well. Third is, let's say if your model is training weeks or months to train, then you can use TPUs to accelerate that performance. Or fourth, if you're working with larger batch sizes. So if you have large batch sizes, that means that you will have more computations, and that's when TPUs are most effective. So it's very important for us to, because TPUs are free for Google Colab users, it's very important for us to use it responsibly so that everyone can get the benefit from it.
Yeah. And so we come to the final question for the day. So what is this OOF ensembling technique? It's there all over. Can you share some insights about it?
Yeah, so let's break this problem into different chunks. So when we talk about out-of-fold predictions, first we'll have to understand what is k-fold cross-validation. So basically what usually happens is machine learning algorithms are evaluated using this technique called as k-fold cross-validation. And the predictions made on the test set are called as out-of-fold predictions. And let's now talk about what is ensembling. An ensemble is a machine learning model that combines two or more machine learning model to work on the same training set, and they give you a kind of a combination of a model. So you can look at it that it's a stacked architecture. So you will have a base model which will work on the entire training set, and then that will be ensembled with another high level model. So the problem here is that when you're working with the upper layers of the models, you can assume that probably all these might have already seen the training set or the test set that is already present from the base classifier. So the testing is not validated because you might have seen that data in training in your previous base example or a base model. So the best practice here is to have a separate holdout test data set that is not used in any other training. So that will not be used either when you're training your base model or your further layers. And then finally, when your ensembling is done, that's when you use that holdout data set to measure how well your model is performing. So this is the out of fold ensembling technique.
Thank you so much, Akshay, for coming on board and sharing all the insights and knowledge with the audience. Thank you once again, and I would highly recommend everyone out there watching this video to check out his project, Sign Language Detection for Deaf and Mute People. He's also been featured in MIT and a lot of other video channels as well. Please do go check out his project. Thank you, everyone. This is it from me and Akshay. Hope you had enjoyed the use case on melanoma classification from Lessian images. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah.